And boom, we're live. MMA Complete Podcast, episode number 75. Today is December 9th. We are 2 days away from UFC 269, and we're 5 days removed from UFC on ESPN 27, I believe it was, between Jose Aldo and Rob Font. Today we got a little bit to go over. It's not going to be a huge show. It's not going to be too long because coming up in the next coming weeks, we have a lot planned for MMA Complete Podcast. So make sure you check out Fans Only Sports on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Make sure you check out our own personal Twitter at complete_MMA. Make sure you go follow us on our YouTube page, MMA Complete Podcast. And everywhere that I just mentioned, everywhere that you can follow us, is where you can check us out this Saturday when we have our live reactions of UFC 269. UFC 269 will be this Saturday on December 11th, and we will be live streaming from 10 p.m. all the way to 1 a.m. I'm just going to say it right now. My own household has a COVID-19 scare, so unfortunately I will be alone for this podcast, but hopefully by next week or 2 weeks from now, we will be back on track because starting December 23rd, MMA Complete is doing our end of the year superlatives, our second annual superlatives for the year of 2021, and it was a super exciting year. Superlatives will include Fight of the Year, Fighter of the Year, Submission of the Year, KO of the Year, Coach of the Year, Division of the Year, and then what was the other one? There was one more. I can never remember them. I was pretty sure that there was 6 though. No, I think I got it. All right, so those, yeah, that was 6. I must have mentioned them all. So those 6 superlatives will be given out on December 23rd for our show. Hopefully all the boys can be there for that one. That's going to be a really good show. Last year it was a huge success. Everybody seemed to like it. And we're going to have a lot more fun with it this year. What I am more excited about, honestly, is that this year we are doing an end of the year divisional rankings from our own personal thoughts, MMA Complete. MMA Complete's first annual divisional rankings, I guess I'm going to call it. So if you hadn't checked out our own YouTube page, episodes 63, 64, and 67 are us going through in the months of October and November, I want to say. I think it might be September and October. And we went through each division and we stated our own personal rankings and how we think the rankings should be based off of UFC's rankings, of course, but we went through and gave our reasons for why some fighters were above others. I know when we did it at first, we had a couple names that were higher than UFC had that have actually panned out pretty well. Names like Giga Chikadze, names like Jose Aldo, who just went up to number 3 in the bantamweight divisions rankings, and names like Islam Makhachev. So 3 guys that all had good, strong ends of the year that we predicted to be higher up in the rankings went up there anyway. So it was a big success when we did it a couple months ago. I think it will be even better when we do it not this upcoming, but 3 weeks time, December 30th. We will be doing all divisions. If we have time, we will even sneak in the women's divisions, which we unfortunately couldn't do earlier the last couple months ago when we did it. I've been meticulously ranking my own rankings for each division and for the pound-for-pound rankings. And the pound-for-pound is tough, man. I have the pound-for-pound for women and men, and it is super difficult. And it's not difficult because I'm trying to make my rankings different from the UFC. Even though I'm trying to make a little bit different because the UFC likes to cater towards the media stars, and I'm trying to do my division solely based on the best fighters and who would win versus each other. And the UFC rankings, the pound-for-pound rankings, after I took a look at each division and made my own rankings, the pound-for-pound rankings might be the closest of any rankings to my own personal, which in my opinion would mean that they got it right. And so I thought that was interesting. You know, a lot of the divisional rankings, they had stars or fighters, I should say, that didn't really deserve it, but they had press or whatever. and they got bumped up. And for the pound for pound ranking, they actually did a lot of good work. There was one guy on the UFC's pound for pound ranking. You go look right now, that I believe is unjustly high. This is a great fighter, and he is a pretty big media star, and that is why he's so high. And he just got off 2 fights this year that made his media star pop more than I believe it should be, even though this guy is not only he's going to be going for a title this Saturday, but he's a worthy competitor, of course, but he's just not there yet when it comes to the top 5 in the world right now. And Dustin Poirier, who I was talking about, is ranked number 5 in the UFC's pound for pound rankings, which I do believe is much too high. We're going to get into this on December 30th when we talk about it, but just for a reference, the only 2 big mistakes I saw in the UFC's pound for pound rankings is that Poirier is too high, he's number 5, and Petr Yan is too low, he's number 11. I would switch those, and I think when I reveal my list, I think that it will show, in the reasons I give, it will show why you would switch those guys. But that might not be here nor there, because after this weekend, if Dustin Poirier does what he expects to do, he might be number 5. Poirier versus Oliveira is this weekend. Main event for UFC 269. It's for the lightweight title. Dustin Poirier on a 4-fight win streak, 3 or 4. His only loss in the last 5 years is to Khabib, and he has finished almost everybody that he's fought. Dustin Poirier is one of the most well-rounded fighters in one of the most well-rounded divisions, and he's only lost to one person, and that one person has never lost. Dustin Poirier's resume over the last 5-6 years is as impressive as it gets. I would argue it's better than Charles Oliveira's. Charles Oliveira is currently on a 9-fight win streak. He's obviously the champion. He TKO'd Michael Chandler, the only person to stop Michael Chandler in the UFC currently. And so that's mighty impressive too. He also dominated Tony Ferguson to get that title shot. Super impressive. But Charles Oliveira's record, his 9-fight win streak, is not as impressive as I would like it to be. He is the man. He's the submission expert in the UFC. But, when 3 of your last fights are not in the UFC anymore, and I'm talking about Kevin Lee, who just recently got released, and I have my own quorums about that. I don't think he should be, but that's what it is. Kevin Lee's not in the UFC anymore. Jared Gordon and Nick Lentz are no longer in the UFC either. And so his last 2 wins are impressive names. He TKO'd Michael Chandler. That was a great win. He dominated Tony Ferguson. That was a good win, but he probably should have been able to finish Tony. And then the others were not that impressive. But Charles Oliveira has 14 submission victories in the UFC. That's 2 more than the next. He's a 9-fight win streak. That's good for the best in the lightweight division currently. And he is a well-rounded fighter. Going into the Chandler fight, everybody thought he was a submission expert, and he TKO'd Chandler. So Charles Oliveira is the champ. Dustin Poirier is a hungry challenger. To play the devil's advocate like I just did for Oliveira, I'll do it for Poirier. Poirier is only here because he just beat Conor McGregor twice. Yes, he's on a 3-fight win streak, and yes, he is one of the biggest names in the division. But his last 3 fights, in hindsight, are not great. He TKO'd Conor in the second. That's impressive. It is impressive. But Conor's on the downswing. He had a 5-round war with Dan Hooker that almost won Fight of the Year in 2020. That was impressive until we saw the decline that Hooker's been on, and now it's like it's good. He had a great fight and he won, but he should have been able to destroy Hooker. And then Conor McGregor's leg was fractured. I'm not sure the exact medical cause of the stoppage, but the fight was stopped in between rounds 1 and 2. And so technically, air quotes, he finished McGregor twice, but he really didn't finish him twice. He finished him once. And those 3, none of those are impressive to you. the fight against Hooker was probably the most impressive, and Oliveira's knockout of Michael Chandler is arguably, in my opinion, it is more impressive than any Poirier's wins in the last 3 years. 2 years, excuse me, 2 years. So those two will be fighting for the lightweight title in a division of monsters, in a division of savages. You know, you got the up-and-coming Islam Makhachev. You got the bear, Beneil Dariush. You have Justin Gaethje, the human highlight reel. You have Conor McGregor, who's looking to make a return. Rafael Fiziev, who is arguably the hottest prospect in the lightweight division, who just had a flying heel kick knockout of Brad Riddell last week in UFC on ESPN 28. The name value of this fight coming up is very intriguing. Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira right now are two of the biggest names in the lightweight division, if not the biggest. But and are they the two best fighters? Is Justin Gaethje and Islam Makhachev a more intriguing fight? Which hasn't been named, by the way. But although Makhachev Dariush has been named for February 26th of 2022, that fight I think will be amazing. I don't know. There's this certain spark that the main event should have. That name value, Poirier Oliveira, that is it. It's worth a spark and it'll get people to watch, but it's not as intriguing as I would hope for in the final lightweight championship of the year should be. And who knows, maybe I'm just a critic. I mean, I am a critic, but maybe I'm just cynical because this division has been arguably the best division of the year, which you can find out what we do think is the best division of the year on December 23rd when we do our second annual superlatives. I don't know. I feel like there's just something a little bit missing. I'm gonna watch the fight. I think it's gonna be a great fight, and I think it's gonna be a really, really great pay per view. The more I talk about this pay per view in this podcast, you'll see that I really am super intrigued by this pay per view. But yeah, there's just a little something missing from the main event. I don't know. This, you know what it is? I can tell you exactly what it is. It just hit me because I'm about to talk about the co-main event between Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena for the women's bantamweight title. We've seen a lot of cards that are top heavy, and you can expect that. You can expect, filler fights that aren't really that juicy. You might get a huge knockout in the prelims here or there. That's kind of cool, but you get a top heavy fight. UFC 268 was a top heavy card. Gaethje Chandler, Usman versus Covington, Namajunas 2. Even though Gaethje Chandler was moved to the beginning of the main card, that was a top heavy card. That was like, oh, I'm so excited to stay up till 1 because from 11:30 to 1 o'clock is just banger after banger after banger. This fight, this card is almost bottom heavy. Like, sure, Poirier versus Oliveira is exciting, but doesn't have that spark. And there's no rivalry either. That might be another part that I'm kind of overlooking in the fact that the main event isn't. But this card's so bottom heavy. This card has bangers on the early prelims at like 7 o'clock. It's outrageous. So I'm gonna go over all the fights. We're gonna talk about them. I'm also going to be giving my picks. Unfortunately, my boys couldn't be here tonight to give out their picks, but I think I can do a little bit of justice in talking about who I think they'll win. I'm pretty sure I know who Austin. I'm pretty sure. I won't speak for him exactly because I haven't talked to him in a couple days and I haven't gone over the exact details of what he thinks. But I do think I know him pretty well, and I think we've talked about it a little bit to say what he thinks is going to happen. All right, so Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. What can you say about this fight? Amanda Nunes is going to win. What else can you say about this fight? Juliana Pena is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She is normally, I believe, a flyweight fighter who is going to bantamweight to take on Amanda Nunes. This isn't anything new. We know that Dana White is trying to give new competition and build up more suspense for Amanda Nunes' fight because there haven't been any suspense for Amanda Nunes' fight in like 4 years. Amanda Nunes' last fight was against Megan Anderson, and she armbarred her in 2 minutes. Amanda Nunes is the GOAT of UFC, at least women's division, and an arguable GOAT for any fighter in the UFC's history. Juliana Pena doesn't deserve a chance on paper. That's not fair. Juliana Pena is a really world-class fighter, especially on the ground, but she's on a one-fight win streak where she choked out Sarah McMahon. Not impressive. She's a filler, unfortunately, and I think she will lose to Amanda Nunes. Another reason why I say this is bottom heavy, because the co-main event of Amanda Nunes is just like, here we go, let's watch Amanda Nunes win. Which is great to see the GOAT win, and it's, when we look back on it in 10 years, we should have appreciated Amanda Nunes more for what she was. Sure. But we also want to see competitive fights, and we want to see, and we're intrigued by upsets, and that's just not going to happen. In the third fight from the top, we have Jeff Neal versus Santiago Ponzinibbio in a welterweight fight between Neal, who is number 12 in the rankings, and Ponzinibbio, who's 14. Jeff Neal coming off a walk-off head kick knockout. Santiago Ponzinibbio is on a 4-fight win streak. This fight is interesting. Ponzinibbio is one of those guys that won't go away. He's been in the UFC for 7 or 8 years. Every time he gets to those, he's going to fight a number 9 guy. He's going to fight a number 7 guy. He's going to fight for a top 10 spot. He loses. That's been the story of his career. This is his third round. This is his third time resurging into the upper rankings. Give him the best, but Jeff Neal is a heavy hitter. Jeff Neal is a knockout artist, and I think that Jeff Neal will win. I'm going to go ahead and say a decision victory. I think Ponzinibbio will get rocked in the second round. Jeff Neal will kind of take him down and let it go over. The over-under on each of the top 3 fights is 1.5, by the way. I think they all go over. Amanda Nunes is the only one I'm worried about. But Jeff Neal is, he wouldn't shock me if he did get an early knockout either. He's a big dude for 170, man. And both of these guys, this is their ceiling, right? Like, they're going to fight each other. Winner goes maybe to number 11 or 10 of the division, and that's really all they can do. The welterweight division is so stacked and full of a bunch of fighters that fucking waste time and back out of fights to keep their rankings. I'm sorry. I know that's disrespectful to say to the Jorge Masvidals and everybody and the Leon Edwards, but that's what happens, man. You got to win a lot of high-profile fights to make it high in that division, and it just doesn't move like that, unfortunately, unless your name is Kamaru Usman, who is, without doubt, the most competitive and the most he fights the most in that division, is the point I'm trying to make. Next fight on the card, Kai Kara-France versus Cody Garbrandt. Cody No Love returns to the UFC. His last fight we saw him in was 2020, I believe, or early 2021, where he got decimated by Rob Font in the bantamweight division. And now Cody No Love is going down to flyweight. This is his first fight for Cody Garbrandt at 125 pounds. He has released some pictures on his Twitter that have showed that he is pretty ripped. He's in great shape. He actually just released an article. MMAfighting.com just put out an article on Cody Garbrandt, and where he says that he's going to be taking the division over. So that's interesting. Sorry, that was my phone. But Kai Kara-France is absolutely no fucking slouch, man. He fought Rogerio Bontorin in his last fight, a guy who is known for putting a pace on people, and Kai Kara-France knocked his ass out. So we're going to see 2 heavy-hitting 125ers in this fight. And Cody Garbrandt, I want to root for him. I want to believe in him. He is stepping down a division, which I never really love. I love when fighters go up a division. But, Kai Kara-France is no one to slouch at. Cody Garbrandt has In 2020, he had the knockout of the year, in my opinion. Or actually, no, he didn't. Joaquin Buckley had the knockout of the year. But his one-punch knockout of Rafael Sunsao to beat the buzzer was arguably one of the best right hooks I've ever seen. And so he's going to be looking to bring that power. But when you think of the kind of similarities between Kai Kara France and Cody Garbrandt's last opponent, Rob Font, they're both smaller, quicker guys who like to put a pace on you, who are very comfortable on the ground. Cody Garbrandt's not great on the ground. It's a tough fight. And, Cody, you got to believe him when he says that he feels great going into this new division and he feels like it's his new career resurgence and he's going to do this and that. Cody Garbrandt's such a big name of the sport, and maybe that's what's hypnotizing me a little bit. But as you can see, first they've talked about on the pod bet. Cody Garbrandt is on my pod bet right now. I would really love to talk to the boys about it because it's the one fight on the pod bet. Actually, no, Amanda Nunes is on here too. Yeah. Oh, okay. I forgot about Amanda Nunes. It's the one fight on the pod bet that I'm not too sure about, Cody Garbrandt. But I said it last week that I think that Cody's going to have the power to knock him out. And I think that Cody Garbrandt's wealth of experience is going to set him over the edge against Kai Kara France. And I'm going to stick with it. It might be bad. It might be the one kicker on the pod bet, but I like Cody Garbrandt. And I think he will win. Last fight of the main card, Raulian Paiva versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. Bantamweight fight. Raulian Paiva doing the opposite Cody Garbrandt. He's going from flyweight to bantamweight to fight Sean O'Malley. Now, on paper, the first thing that you might think about if you just listen to what I just said is that Sean O'Malley is a huge 135er and he's fighting a guy who's in flyweight. So that is a huge thing. I believe Sean O'Malley's going to have a 5-inch height advantage in this fight, but the reach advantage is only about 3 inches, which is much better. Either way, Sean O'Malley's going to win. I believe so. I know Austin believes so. Austin definitely thinks Sean O'Malley's going to win. I totally said I was going to be giving Austin's picks, and I forgot. Austin also believes Poirier's going to win. Hesitant like me, but I want to say that the only reason, I think Austin said this to me last week on the podcast, the only reason he's not as confident in Poirier is because I'm not as confident in Poirier, because he thought that Poirier would be the overwhelming favorite in at least our thought processes, that I made him rethink it. But I do know that he is a huge believer in Dustin Poirier. Loves the hot sauce, of course. And I think that he also obviously is taking Nunes. I don't believe he had an opinion on Neil Ponzinibbio, but I do believe that he's also taking Cody Garbrandt. So Sean O'Malley versus Raulian Paiva. This is going to be an interesting fight. Paiva is probably the first fighter that O'Malley fights that is going to be much faster than O'Malley. O'Malley has the reach advantage. He has the striking advantage. He's going to be doing his little dribbles and fucking pump fakes and shit that he did against Chris Moutinho. Super entertaining. I think this fight goes the distance all the way to 3 rounds, so there's another over for you. O'Malley's last fight on his current contract. 2022, we're going to see O'Malley start to fight the big boys. We're going to see him try to fight ranked guys. Maybe go after Marlon Vera again. Can't wait for that. But yeah, no, I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. Sean O'Malley, winner by unanimous decision. In his last fight, he outstruck Chris Moutinho 230-70. Raulian Paiva is a much better competitor than Chris Moutinho. No offense, Chris Moutinho, who trains out of Fall River. But Raulian Paiva has had some wars over the last year. He should be ranked in the flyweight division right now. I don't know why he's not, but Paiva should get his credit all day, but I do think he should stick to flyweight, and when he's going to make a bantamweight push, shouldn't go after the likes of Sean O'Malley, who's an enigma in the division. So that is your main card for UFC 269. Like I said, will be coming this weekend, December 11th. We will be doing live reactions from 10 p.m. all the way to 1 a.m. of the card. So we're going to be watching the main card. And where you can check that out at Fans Only Sports, many platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can check it out on our Twitter, @complete_MMA. And you can check it out on our YouTube page, MMA Complete Podcast. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we get back, I'm going to keep going with the early prelims and the prelims because this card, like I said, is so bottom heavy. There's so many great fights. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. So we talked about the main card in pretty good detail. I have mentioned the pod bet, which will be obviously every single pay-per-view we do a pod bet. So that will be happening this weekend. I am open to any comments or tweets that you might have about the pod bet. I love you guys' suggestions. You guys helped us out so much with the last one. So go tweet at us at @complete_MMA or drop a comment right now. So the preliminary card for UFC 269 has 4 fights in it. The 4 fights that are on this card, I'm going to go over really quickly, are Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige, Pedro Munoz versus Dominic Cruz, Augusto Sakai versus Tai Tuivasa, and Jordan Wright versus Bruno Silva. I can't remember the last time that we had a preliminary card in which every fighter has a chance to be ranked. Obviously, as it stands right now, only 5 of the 8 fighters right now are ranked. The 3 that are not are Tai Tuivasa, Jordan Wright, and Bruno Silva. And if they win, they absolutely could be. Bruno Silva, Jordan Wright in middleweight, Tai Tuivasa versus Augusto Sakai in heavyweight, Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige in featherweight, Pedro Munoz versus Dominic Cruz in bantamweight. Let's go from the top to the bottom, carrying on what I've been doing. Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige. This fight is super interesting, right? Because Josh Emmett right now is ranked number 8, Dan Ige number 9. Josh Emmett has won 3 in a row. Dan Ige has won 1 of his last 3. Dan Ige has fought the better competition. Dan Ige's last 2 losses are against Chan Sung Jung and Calvin Kattar. Josh Emmett hasn't fought anybody in the top 5. They both have a win over Mirsad Bektic. Dan Ige's last win, Gavin Tucker, is not as good as Josh Emmett's last win of Shane Burgos. This is a draw for me because I don't know who the hell is going to win. Dan Ige's faster. Josh Emmett is better on the ground. Josh Emmett can hit a little bit harder, but Dan Ige's been more experienced. I honestly, I've been mulling this fight over and over in my mind. Josh Emmett is the big favorite on paper, by the way, for like Vegas odds, Sportsbook RI odds. Big favorite. But I don't know. This is such a close battle. It's definitely worth the sprinkle on Dan Ige. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm not gonna weigh in here. I'm pretty sure that Austin liked Dan Ige. I don't know about the rest of the guys. But this fight is going to be so close. I think it goes the distance. So that is over the 1.5. 2.5? Is it 2.5? It is 2.5. I would take the over on the 2.5. It's going to be a really competitive and close fight, which is super interesting. I'll say Dan Ige. I don't want to take sides, but Dan Ige is going to win this fight, I guess. Next up, we have... what was the next one? I knew this too. Dominic Cruz versus Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is going to win, but I want Dominic Cruz to win. Dominic Cruz trying to get back in the top 5 of the bantamweight division. It would be so cool to see him there because waiting in the wings in the top 5 is TJ Dillashaw. And to see a TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz fight again would be something amazing. Cruz beat Dillashaw. Did he? Was it 1-1 or was it 2-0? Dominic Cruz did beat Dillashaw. I thought so. Okay. And Dominic Cruz is, of course, 38 now. He's past his prime, but Dominic Cruz is, in my opinion, the bantamweight GOAT, the best that division's ever seen. Piotr Jan's getting up there. Jose Aldo's getting up there. But, yeah, I think Dominic Cruz is the GOAT, and he's fighting Pedro Munoz. That's a tough, tough fight, man. Pedro Munoz is a absolute warrior. The last time we saw Pedro Munoz, he lost to Jose Aldo, but that's just because Jose Aldo is wrecking people at 135 right now. Munoz has had a crazy tough last 5 fights. Jose Aldo, Jimmy Rivera, Frankie Edgar, Aljamain Sterling, and Cody Garbrandt. That's about as great of a test at 135 through 5 fights that you will see on anyone's record. Pedro Munoz should win this. He might even knock out Dominic Cruz. I wouldn't be surprised. The over under on there is no over under on Sportsbook RI right now. I don't even think this fight is on Sportsbook RI's radar. But I like Pedro Munoz. You never know because Dominic Cruz has the craziest style I think I've ever seen with his footwork. But man, I like Dominic Cruz a lot, and there's not a lot of people in the top 5, in the top 10 through 5, I should say, that I don't think would beat Cruz. Pedro Munoz should beat him. Pedro Munoz should absolutely beat him. All right, next up we have Augusto Sakai versus Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa is the most underrated heavyweight on the planet. I'm going to say it. Tai Tuivasa has power, obviously. He has submissions, and I believe 2 of his last 5 fights he's won by submission. And he has some cardio for the big boy. He has that gut, but man, he can go. He can go for rounds. I think he has a couple decisions, losses maybe, but I think he has gone to a couple decisions in his career. So he's fighting Augusto Sakai. Augusto Sakai is a great kickboxer, can kick your head off, but as long as Tai Tuivasa doesn't get absolutely left-footed into the ground, I think Tai Tuivasa wins this fight and switches his rankings with Augusto Sakai. I think that Tuivasa will be ranked after this fight's over, and Augusto Sakai will be taken out. Augusto Sakai, in my opinion, I mean, obviously great kickboxer, and he's a great fighter. But his last 2 losses are against Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Alistair Overeem. And his last win was against Blagoni Ivanov, and that is, it's kind of, it almost makes me mad that Tuivasa is ranked or is not ranked, and Sakai is. I would think that these guys would be switched already. But anyway, I think Tai Tuivasa will win. I'm going to go ahead and say by decision. Again, another fight that's not even on the radar of the Sportsbook RI, but over-under, I would take the over. Last fight on the main card, on the preliminary card, is Jordan Wright versus Bruno Silva. Jordan Wright 12-1. Bruno Silva is, I believe, 10-3. Jordan Wright at one point looked like he might make a huge push into the middleweight division until he got TKO'd by Joaquin Buckley last year. Jordan Wright is the massive underdog in this fight. Massive. The biggest underdog on this entire card. And he's fighting Bruno Silva, a guy that I'm ashamed to say I don't know anything about. I've been looking. He has some okay wins. He's on like a 3-fight win streak. That's nice. But he's fighting Jordan Wright, who I really liked last year and coming into this year. And he's such the big underdog. So I'm almost tempted to put him on the pod bet, Jordan Wright, but I'm just going to be sprinkling a little bit on Jordan Wright. I think that I'm going to sprinkle him money line, and I'm also going to sprinkle him by TKO. And I think that everybody should. This one fight is the one fight that I'm like, you got to touch it at least because the number is there, and it's there in spades, and it's kind of crazy that it's there. I don't have too much else to say. Jordan Wright is a really good, well-rounded fighter who likes to stand and bang. He got TKO'd because he got caught against Joaquin Buckley. If he didn't, I think he would have won, and I think we wouldn't be talking about such a big underdog because he'd be 13-0. But he's 12-1 right now. He's fighting Bruno Silva. I think that Jordan Wright, if with a knockout of Bruno Silva in such an underdog spot, possibly moves him up to number 15 in the middleweight rankings after this fight. All right. I told you guys that this fight card is bottom heavy. The 4 fights that I'm about to list for you are in the early prelims. Early prelims. This shit's going to start at like 6 o'clock. And we're going to see Ryan Hall versus Derek Minner at 6 o'clock. All right. If you know anything about what is this? Lightweight rankings? Featherweight rankings. Featherweight rankings. Ryan Hall is supposedly up next. Ryan Hall, he beat BJ Penn and Darren Elkins, Gray Maynard, and Artem Lobov before making his first huge fight in the UFC. He already had a couple, but his first huge fight in the UFC against the featherweight division's biggest prospect in Ilia Tuporia, in which he got absolutely flatlined. But Ryan Hall has some crazy jiu-jitsu, man. This guy's doing Imanari rolls, and he's like looking like he's breakdancing on the fucking canvas. I swear to God, Ryan Hall's super entertaining. He's going to be fighting Derek Minner. Derek Minner. Excuse me. Who has a huge right hand. It's a clash of styles here. You got the jiu-jitsu guy versus you got the boxer. I think Ryan Hall's going to win. Ryan Hall, I believe, was unjustly put up against Ilia Tuporia too quickly. And I think that, I think if he had a more competitive fight against Tuporia, his name wouldn't be dragged through the mud a little bit. But unfortunately it was, and I think this is a great shot for him to come back into the good graces of the prospect rankings of the featherweight division. I think Ryan Hall has a really good shot here, and I think that he will pull off a submission in round 1. So Hall versus Minner's 2.5. I'm going to go ahead and take the under on that. That's another big bet that I really like. And then we have the flyweight division's number 4 ranked fighter, Alex Perez, fresh off a loss to Davison Figueiredo for the flyweight title last year. This guy's fighting in the early prelims, and he was just a challenger for the flyweight title. Alex Perez is going to be fighting Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell, one of the more entertaining fighters at 125. This is a flyweight fight. Two things. Both guys are going to be super well-rounded. You know that both guys are going to be super fast. Alex Perez is more of the brick shithouse build. Matt Schnell, more of the tall, lanky guy. Matt Schnell has some great boxing, though. His last loss against Rogerio Bontorin did hurt, but that's because Bontorin is just better. Bontorin is one of the top 5 fighters in the division. And Matt Schnell stood with him the whole time, even though he kind of should have brought it to the ground. But this fight, don't expect any ground fight. Expect Alex Perez and Matt Schnell to just stand and bang the whole time. And like I said, this fight's going to happen at like 6:30. This fight could easily be on the main card. But because maybe they're not as known, it's in the early prelims. And it's such a travesty because these guys are going to put on such a great fight. And it's one that I can't wait to watch. I think Alex Perez is going to win. I think Perez is going to win. I think he's the better fighter. But Matt Schnell he's going to be looking for a TKO. This is a fight that really could get stopped early, even though it's 125 pounds and you're likely to see it go to a decision. But, and I'm going to say decision. I'm going to say Alex Perez by decision. Unanimous decision, too. It's a crazy card, and it gets better. Next fight on the prelims is Aaron Blanchfield, fresh off one of the most dominating victories you'll ever see against what was her name? That totally contradicts myself, doesn't it? Aaron Blanchfield fought Sarah Alpar in September and had a significant strike advantage of 128-41. All right, so Aaron Blanchfield dominated this girl. She will be fighting Miranda Maverick, the best prospect in the women's flyweight division. Maverick's going to win. Maverick should win, but it's going to be the best women's fight of the night. Can I say that? I know Amanda Nunes is fighting. Don't hate me, Nunes followers. Her fights are never really great. They're not really competitive. You go in there knowing Nunes is going to win, and then she wins, and you're like, oh, it was cool to see her, but like, at least that's her last couple fights. Maverick versus Blanchfield will be a war. It'll go all the way to decision, I believe, 3 rounds. And Miranda Maverick will win. Pod bet alert. Maverick's on the pod bet. Not worried about that. And then the last fight that we are going to talk about today, the 4th fight on the early prelims, Andre Muniz versus Eric Anders. Andre Muniz, a cult hero here at MMA Complete Podcast. I believe he gave us a follow and a couple likes one time on Twitter at complete_MMA. Shout out Andre Muniz. Muniz dislocated the shoulder of Jacare Souza when he was like 24 years old. Like, what the fuck? Who does that? Muniz, he's up next in the middleweight division. I really, truly believe that. He's one of the up-and-coming prospects. You've heard me say prospect a lot tonight and last week, I believe. But I've been really getting into prospects in the UFC and who's going to be up next for 2022. Andre Muniz is up there. Right up there with like Ilya Tuporia and Shavkat Rakhmonov and Miranda Maverick. Those 4 are like 4 of the biggest prospects in the UFC right now, and Andre Muniz is fighting Eric Anders. Eric Anders is a really good fighter, well-rounded, but I believe that Muniz can take this fight to he could stand and beg. People forget that when he boxed at the beginning of the fight with Jacare Souza, he was landed some really good shots, and then he took Souza to the ground and he dislocated his fucking shoulder, and he did it with an armbar that was way too high. It looked like Jacare was going to get out easily, and then Muniz just snaps his shoulder. Andre Muniz, another one on the pod bet. The 4th money line of the pod bet. I'm excited to see Muniz fight. I really am. I think that this guy could be ranked after this fight because people are sleeping on Muniz, and I think that he could be poised to make a run in 2022. I think that he could have. Let's look at the middleweight rankings right now. Number 15, Shabazian, 14, Holland, 13, Weidman, 12, Imavov, 11, Tavares, 10, Gastelum. I think that Andre Muniz, granted, Chris Weidman's not going to fight. We know that. I think Andre Muniz could beat anybody in the 15 through 10 through 11 range. I don't know about Gastelum. That's tough. But Brad Tavares, Nasruddin Imavov, Kevin Holland, Edmund Shabazian, I don't think any of them can stand with Andre Muniz on the ground. I think his jiu-jitsu is way too strong. He's on a 5-fight win streak. I love this kid. I think that he's like 26 years old, by the way. I say kid, he's older than me. I think that Andre Muniz is up next, and it started with his impressive victory over Jacare, and I think that his win against Eric Anders this weekend will make it even better. So those are the fights for UFC 269. Like I said, the shit's bottom heavy. The early prelims and prelims might be better than the main card for those diehards like me that really care about like the fighters and the actual rankings and the skill level of the individual fighters. You got Dominic Cruz in the prelims. The fuck? You got Alex Perez, number 4 ranked Alex Perez in the early prelims, second fight of the entire card. This is going to be a great pay-per-view. I really believe that. I mentioned on the pod bet, the only other bet I'm taking for the pod bet is the over-under of Poirier Oliveira. I think that fight goes like 3 rounds. So the over-under is 1.5. I've kind of talked myself into maybe taking the over for Kai Kara-France and Cody Garbrandt. No, it wasn't Kara-France Garbrandt. I think it was Paiva O'Malley. That could get added in there. Maybe take off Garbrandt altogether and put that in there. I don't know. But make sure you follow us on Twitter because that's where we're going to be posting the pod bet as we do every week. Or every month, I should say. Pod bets have been going strong. 266 hit, 267 hit. The combined pod bet between 267 and 268 hit. So make sure you check us out on Twitter for the final pod bet because you guys want to make some money, right? You guys want to make money. That's what we've been doing here over the last couple of months is we've been making money on these pod bets. So make sure you give us a shout for that. Otherwise, make sure you come check us out on our UFC 269 live reactions this Saturday, December 11th, 10 p.m. through 1 a.m., wherever you're watching this now, whether it be our YouTube page, MMA Complete Podcast, our Twitter, @complete_MMA, or Fans Only Sports, many platforms on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. That's all I got to say. Hopefully the boys will be back soon. We're working on some locations for the live reactions, so hopefully I can hang out with the guys and watch the fights. And that's going to do it, everybody. I appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate everybody checking us out and keeping us up to date. We've been doing really well. 2021 was a great year for the podcast. It's only going to get better. Make sure you check us out December 23rd for our second annual Superlatives. Make sure you check us out December 30th when we reorder our own personal rankings of the UFC divisions. That's going to do it for me, everybody. Thank everybody for tuning in. I'm out of here.